All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep on something pretty fundamental, really the backbone of how our world works, the economy, and business too. You can't
Mm.
have one without the other, right? And we're structuring this deep dive specifically for you, the learner. Someone who wants to understand these topics, build a solid foundation, but doesn't want to drown in a sea of details, right?
Exactly. We've pulled together some excellent resources for this, really aiming to give you a clear, engaging look at the economy, how this whole engine runs, and the absolutely vital role that businesses play in it and making it all go. Our mission here, so to speak, is to distill the key insights, the stuff that really matters, and make it click for you.
So no better place to start than at the very beginning. What is the economy exactly? It's one of those words, right, that feels so big, so abstract, but how does it actually, touch our everyday lives? What does it mean for us?
Well, at its core, you can think of the economy as the system a country uses, the system it uses to manage all of its resources, and to produce the goods and services we all use every day.
Okay, so it's about managing what we have and making the things we need.
Yeah, think about it. Your job, how
Yeah.
much your groceries cost, even, how much you shell out each month for those streaming services. All of that, it's tied to the economy. Really, it's this massive, constantly moving network, a network of individuals, businesses, and the government, all making decisions all the time about buying and selling, about creating things.
So like a giant web of choices, and
Right.
all those choices impact everything else.
You got it. And it's the sum of all those decisions, right, when you zoom out, that determines what a society produces, who gets to buy it, and, yeah, even how many jobs are out there.
So we're all part of this massive system, whether we realize it or not.
We are.
Okay, so where do businesses fit into all of this? They're more than just shops on the street, right? They're the real drivers of this economic machine.
100%. Businesses are the ones taking those resources, raw materials, people's skills, ideas even, and they transform them. They turn those raw ingredients into the goods and services we as consumers want and need. And this isn't just about those giant multinational corporations we always hear about. It includes your local bakery, that innovative tech startup down the street, everything in between.
So they're the ones really making it all happen, taking the inputs, making the outputs. And it's not just about making a profit, is it?
No, not at all. Businesses are essential for, well, for satisfying our needs and our wants, of course, providing employment, which is huge, and contributing to a nation's wealth through their output, their economic activity, and, of course, through the taxes they pay.
And all of this whole system, it all boils down to us, doesn't it? The customers. It's what we want, what we're willing to spend our money on.
That's the fuel, right? That's the driving force. Your favorite coffee shop, that clothing store with the hottest trends, the company developing that must-have app. Their primary aim, at the end of the day, is to offer something people will pay for. Meeting that customer demand, that's what powers business activity, what shapes the entire economic landscape.
Okay, so let's say someone gets inspired. They decide to jump into the world of business. There are some choices they need to make right away about how the business is set up legally, right?
Oh yeah, big time. You can't just, open your doors and hope for the best. There are specific ways to structure a business. 4 main ones, in fact, each with its own rules, its own implications. The simplest one is being a sole trader.
Okay, sole trader. That sounds pretty straightforward.
It is, in a way. One person owns the business, operates the whole thing, they get to keep all the profits.
Sounds tempting.
Right. But here's the catch. They're also personally liable for any debts the business incurs.
Uh-oh. So if things go south financially, that's coming out of their own pocket.
Could be their savings, yeah. Their personal assets even. It's a big risk to consider. Then you have partnerships, which involve 2 or more people agreeing to share in the profits or, well, the losses of a business.
So spreading the workload, but also spreading the risks.
Right. Partnerships, they allow for shared expertise, shared workload, like you said. But typically, partners are also sharing in that personal liability for debts. So that risk factor, it's still there.
Okay, so what happens when a business needs, I don't know, more separation between the owners and the business itself?
That's when the limited company structure comes into play. This one, it's more complex. It basically means the business becomes a separate legal entity, separate from its owners, who are then called shareholders.
Interesting. So the business is almost like its own person, legally, at least.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And that separation, that's a big deal. It protects the owners from personal liability for the company's debts. So if the company incurs a debt, the shareholders' personal assets, well, they're generally protected.
That sounds like a pretty significant advantage.
It is. Especially as a business grows. takes on more financial risk. You often see these as private limited companies, or LTDs, or public limited companies, the PLCs.
LTD and PLC.
Got it. In a PLC, shares can be bought by anyone, really, on a stock exchange,
Yeah.
whereas LTD shares are more privately held. This separation, though, yeah, it adds complexity, but it's often a necessary step for a business that's looking to, really grow, attract major investments.
Makes sense. Okay, and the last structure you mentioned was the franchise. How does that one work?
Franchising is a different beast altogether. In a franchise, someone, we call them the franchisee, they pay for the right to use a well-established brand name and a proven system, all owned by another company, the franchisor.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this. Think fast food chain.
Exactly. Often those individual restaurants, those are franchises. The franchisee, they benefit from instant brand recognition. They get support from the franchisor. But they also got to stick to the franchisor's rules
Yeah.
and pay those ongoing fees, of course.
So it's like a ready-made business blueprint with a big familiar name attached.
Yeah, like a business in a box, kind of.
Interesting. So a business is legally set up. Now it needs to figure out where it's going. It needs some direction, right?
Absolutely. Businesses, they set aims and objectives to provide that direction and also to, measure their progress along the way. Aims are like your long-term, big picture goals. So an example might be to become the leading provider in the sector.
Okay, so that's their grand vision, where they want to be.
Exactly. Objectives, on the other hand, they're much more specific, measurable targets. Targets that help the business reach those big aims.
Okay, so give me an example of an objective.
Sure. So if the aim is to become the leading provider, the objective might be to increase market share by 5% in the next 2 years.
Okay, much more concrete.
Right. And it's important that these objectives, they need to be realistic. They need to provide a clear path forward. It's like saying, we want to climb this mountain. That's the aim. And then, setting out specific base camps along the way. Those are your objectives.
I like that analogy. Now, businesses, they don't operate in vacuum. They interact with all sorts of people and groups. Who are the key players that a business has to consider?
These are your stakeholders, individuals and groups that have an interest in the business and its success. Think about customers, first and foremost. They want value for their money.
Right, that's me at the store.
Then you have employees, looking for fair wages, good working conditions, and of course the owners or shareholders. They want to see profits. You can't forget suppliers. They want reliable business relationships. And then there's the local community, concerned about job creation, the environment, and of course the government, interested in taxes, making sure everything's legal.
Wow, it's amazing how many different groups a business needs to think about. Sounds almost like a political negotiation, juggling all those interests.
It can be sometimes. And ignoring the needs of your key stakeholders, well, that can cause some serious problems down the road.
Like a business could lose customers, have unhappy employees, run into legal trouble.
Exactly. It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got legal structure, aims and objectives, stakeholders. Seems like where a business chooses to, actually be physically, that's a big decision too, right?
Location, right. It's a cliche for a reason. Could it make or break a business? So many factors come into play. The cost of the premises, of course. Then, is there suitable labor available? Does the area have workers with the skills the business needs?
Right, so a tech company might need programmers. A restaurant needs chefs.
Exactly. And then proximity to customers and suppliers. That's huge for things like transportation costs, quality of transport links, for getting goods in and out. That's vital. And then sometimes you have government incentives trying to attract business to certain regions.
So a retail store probably wants to be where the shoppers are. And a factory might prioritize being near its raw materials or having good highway access.
You got it. A bustling city center might be perfect for a high-end boutique, while a manufacturer might prefer a location with, cheaper land, good access to transportation.
Makes sense. Now, for any business, especially a new one, there's this thing everyone talks about, the business plan. What is it exactly, and why is it so important?
The business plan, it's like the roadmap for the whole venture. It outlines the goals, the strategies, how the business will actually operate day to day.
So like a blueprint for building a successful business.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It usually includes, what products or services are being offered, the target market, the marketing plan, how sales will work, financial projections, all the nitty-gritty details.
And this helps the business stay organized, make informed decisions, all that.
Absolutely. It forces you to think everything through in advance. And it's often a crucial document for getting funding. from banks,
Yeah.
investors. They want to see that you have a plan.
So it's like showing them you've done your homework. You're serious about this.
Exactly. It shows you're prepared. And then ideally, with a solid plan in place, well, business will grow, right?
Right, and growth can take many forms, can it? How does a business actually expand its operations? What are some common ways?
Lots of paths to explore. They might open new branches, new stores in different areas, developing new products, new services to, appeal to more customers. Another big one is entering new markets, maybe going international. Then you have takeovers, mergers, joining forces with existing businesses. And of course, franchising, like we talked about, that's a way to expand without directly managing every new location.
Lots of options to consider. Now, we've been talking about what happens inside a business, but clearly there are all sorts of forces outside a business that can have a huge impact, right?
Oh, absolutely. Businesses, they don't exist in a vacuum. They're constantly being shaped by external factors, things often outside their direct control. So we've looked at how businesses run, how they grow from within. Now let's zoom out a bit. Look at those powerful forces outside of business that can really make a difference.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start with the big picture, the overall health of the economy. You called it the economic climate. What exactly does that mean?
The economic climate, it's like the overall weather conditions, for businesses. It's the general state of the economy. And it can have a huge impact. A strong economy, well, that can create tons of opportunities. But a weak economy, that throws up all sorts of obstacles.
Makes sense. So, are there like key indicators we can look at to get a sense of the economic climate?
There are, yeah. These are kind of like the vital signs of the economy. One big one is interest rates,
Interest rates. Okay, so those are set by like the government, right?
typically by central banks.
Yeah.
And interest rates, they determine the cost of borrowing money.
Right. So if you get a loan for a house or a car or for a business, you have to pay interest on that loan.
Exactly. So when interest rates are low, businesses, and people too, they're more likely to borrow money, to invest, to spend. And that can stimulate economic activity.
Mm.
A business might take out a loan to buy new equipment, expand their operations.
So low interest rates, generally a good thing for businesses.
Generally, yeah,
Mm.
it tends to encourage growth. Then you have inflation. Inflation is the rate at which prices are rising.
So like how much more expensive things are getting over time.
That's it. And high inflation, well, that can be a real problem for businesses. Costs for raw materials, for all their inputs, those can increase. And people, consumers, they have less money to spend if their wages aren't keeping up with those rising prices.
So it's like your money buys less stuff than it used to.
Precisely. Then we have employment levels. High employment usually means more people have jobs, more money in their pockets. That leads to more spending, good for businesses, obviously. But high unemployment, that's the flip side. People spend less. And wages might even go down because there's more competition for jobs.
Right. Supply and demand, more workers, less demand, wages go down.
You got it. And then we have consumer spending itself, the total amount households are spending. This is a major driver of demand. And it's influenced by things like consumer confidence, how secure people feel about their jobs and finances. So if people are feeling optimistic, they tend to spend more.
Makes sense. Positive outlook, more economic activity. Okay, so we have interest rates, inflation, employment levels, consumer spending. These are all key indicators of the economic climate.
Exactly. And these factors, they all interact. They shape the overall economic climate. And that climate, it influences things like demand for businesses' products, how easy it is for them to get financing, the cost of all their inputs, how competitive they are, even the overall confidence level of business owners.
It's all connected. Now let's talk about another massive force, globalization. What's the big deal for businesses?
Globalization, that's basically the increasing interconnectedness of countries through trade, through information, ideas, the whole nine yards. For businesses, this opens up a world of potential. You can access customers all over the globe, expand your market size tremendously, and you can tap into a wider pool of resources, potentially finding cheaper labor in other countries.
Sounds like a win-win. Bigger markets, lower costs.
It can be.
Yeah.
But globalization also ramps up competition, right? From businesses all over the world.
Right, because suddenly you're not just competing with the shop next door, you're competing with businesses on the other side of the planet.
Exactly. Globalization creates opportunities for offshoring, moving production to other countries, and outsourcing, contracting certain business functions to companies in other countries. Often, this is about cutting costs. But this global interconnectedness, it also introduces complexities.
Such as, what kind of complexities are we talking about?
Well, think legal and political risks. They can be very different when you're operating internationally. And currency fluctuations. Those can really eat into profits if you're not careful. Then you have the logistics of managing operations across huge distances, different time zones.
Right, communicating with someone on the other side of the world can be tricky.
Yeah, and there are cultural differences to consider. Different consumer preferences, business practices. You have to adapt. And increasingly, ethical considerations are becoming huge. Things like fair labor practices in your supply chain.
Uh-huh.
That's critical for a company's reputation.
Right, consumers are paying attention to that kind of thing more and more these days. So going global, lots of potential rewards, but definitely some hurdles to overcome.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how do businesses actually go about operating internationally? What are some common strategies?
Several ways to go about it. The most straightforward is exporting. So you're selling goods produced domestically to customers in other countries. Then you have joint ventures, strategic alliances, teaming up with companies in other countries. Franchising, like we talked about, that's another way to go global. Then there's direct investment, setting up your own operations in another country, a factory, an office. And finally, globalization.
Globalization, that's a new one.
It's a cool strategy. You're adapting your products, your services, to specifically meet the needs of local markets, thinking globally, acting locally.
Interesting. So lots of options for going global. Now let's move on to another set of external faces. The rules of the game, so to speak, the laws and regulations set by governments. What do businesses need to know about legislation?
Well, legislation covers a whole bunch of laws that govern business activities. It's about protecting stakeholders, ensuring fair practices. Consumer law is a big one. It's there to protect the rights of customers, make sure goods are of satisfactory quality, fit for purpose, accurately described.
So if I buy something that's broken or doesn't do what it's supposed to, consumer law protects me.
Exactly. The Consumer Rights Act 2015 is a key piece of legislation in that area. Then there's employment law, protecting the rights of employees, covering things like minimum wage, working conditions, protection from discrimination.
Important stuff, making sure workers are treated fairly.
Right. There's the National Minimum Wage Act in 1998, the Equality Act 2010. Those are key. And the working time regulations, they set limits on working hours. And then there's health and safety law, ensuring safe working environments. That's often enforced by agencies like the Health and Safety Executive, the HSE.
So all these laws, they're basically the ground rules for businesses, and businesses need to play by those rules, right?
They do, absolutely. Not following the rules, well, that could lead to penalties, fines, even legal action. And that can really hurt a business, both financially and in terms of reputation. But businesses that comply, they benefit. They build a good reputation. They attract employees, because they're seen as responsible.
Right, being a good corporate citizen, doing the right thing, it's not just good ethically, it can be good for business in the long run.
It really can.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, technology, another huge force shaping the business world. How has technology changed things?
Oh, technology, it's been revolutionary. It's transformed everything. The internet, for example. It's completely changed how businesses communicate, how they do business. E-commerce, buying and selling online, that's huge.
And think about how businesses reach their customers now. Social media, all of that.
Absolutely. Social media marketing is massive. And then there's automation, computer-aided design, or CAD. These have made production more efficient, less expensive in many industries. The key takeaway is that businesses, they have to adapt. They have to integrate new technologies to stay competitive. If they stand still, they're falling behind.
Right, the tech world moves so fast. Now, beyond legal obligations and technology, there's another big shift we're seeing. The pressure on businesses to be ethical, to be environmentally responsible.
Oh, that's huge. Consumers are demanding it. Investors are paying attention to it. Businesses need to think about the impact of their operations on society, on the environment. Things like fair labor practices, reducing waste, pollution, sustainability in general.
It's not just about making a profit anymore, it's about making a profit responsibly.
Exactly. And consumers, they're voting with their wallets. They're choosing businesses that align with their values.
So doing good can be good for business.
Absolutely.
Okay, now all these businesses, they're operating in a marketplace. And usually that marketplace has other businesses trying to do similar things. Let's talk about competition.
Competition. It's the name of the game. Very few businesses have a complete monopoly. They're almost always operating in a competitive market. And the level of competition, it varies depending on the industry. But it's crucial for a business to understand their competitors.
So, like, who are they? What are they good at? What are their weaknesses?
Exactly. And then how can the business differentiate itself? What makes them unique? What makes them stand out? This might be about price, offering the lowest prices, Or maybe it's about quality, the best product. Or maybe it's exceptional customer service. Or being innovative, coming up with new things. Or maybe it's about building a strong brand.
Right, like that brand has a certain image, a certain reputation.
Exactly. Knowing your competitors and finding ways to differentiate, those are key to success.
So strategy is important, figuring out how to win in that competitive landscape. Now let's get into how a business actually makes things happen day to day. Let's talk about business operations.
Business operations, that's all the activities involved in producing goods or delivering services, the nuts and bolts. One core aspect is the production process itself. And different businesses use different methods depending on what they're making. You have job production, that's for one-off customized things, like a tailor making a suit.
Okay, so each item is unique.
Right. Then you have batch production,
Mm.
producing a set quantity of identical items, like a bakery making a batch of cookies.
Makes sense.
And then flow production. This is continuous standardized production, like a car factory assembly line.
High volume, same product over and over again.
Exactly. And which production method a business uses, well, that affects efficiency, cost, whether they can offer customization, all sorts of things.
Right, so the scale of the operation, the type of product, that all dictates how they set up their production process. What other things fall under business operations?
Well, procurement is a big one. That's the process of getting all the stuff a business needs to function. Raw materials, office supplies, utilities, everything.
So making sure they have what they need when they need it.
Exactly. At the right price, of course. Good procurement, it means managing suppliers carefully, building those relationships. And then there's quality. Quality is paramount. Businesses use quality control measures, inspecting finished products, looking for defects.
Making sure everything is up to standard.
Right. And then there's quality assurance, which is about building quality into the entire process, preventing defects from happening in the first place.
So being proactive rather than reactive.
Exactly. High quality, it means happier customers, a better brand image. And finally, good customer service. That's essential. It's every interaction a business has with its customers.
Right, from the moment a customer walks in the door or visits the website.
It's about having knowledgeable staff, handling complaints well, going the extra mile. All of this builds loyalty, gets people talking about the business in a good way.
Word of mouth can be powerful. Now, a business is only as good as its people. So, human resources or HR, what's that all about?
HR is all about the people who work in the business. Their organizational structure, for example, how the business is organized, different departments, teams, reporting lines, all of that.
Right, so who reports to whom, who's in charge of what?
You might have a hierarchical structure with lots of layers of management, or a flatter structure with fewer layers, or even a matrix structure where people report to multiple managers. And the structure a business chooses, it affects how communication works, how decisions get made, all sorts of things.
Makes sense. So it's not just about who sits where, it's about how the whole organization functions.
Right. And then there's recruitment and selection, finding and hiring the right people. This has to be done fairly and effectively so you attract and keep good people.
Finding the right people for the right jobs.
Exactly. And keeping them motivated. That's a big focus of HR. Encouraging people to work hard, to perform well. This might mean financial rewards, bonuses, raises.
Right.
But it could also be things like recognition programs, opportunities for advancement. And then there's training and development, making sure employees have the skills and knowledge they need.
So investing in your employees.
Exactly. It's an investment in the future success of the business.
Now, how does a business actually get customers in the door? Persuade them to buy their product or service. That's where marketing comes in, right?
You got it. Marketing is all about understanding customer needs and, effectively meeting those needs. The first step is really understanding your target customer. Who are they? What do they want? What motivates them?
Right, so you can tailor your message to that specific audience.
Exactly. You look at things like age, income, lifestyle, values, all that. And then there's market segmentation, dividing the market into smaller groups with similar characteristics, and targeting, choosing which of those segments you're going to focus on.
So you're not trying to be everything to everyone, you're finding your niche.
Exactly. And market research plays a big role, gathering data about customers, competitors, the market itself. This can be surveys, interviews, focus groups, data analysis, all sorts of things.
So you're constantly learning more about your target audience, what they respond to.
Right. And then there's the marketing mix, often called the 4 Ps: product, price, place, promotion. These are the core elements of any marketing strategy.
Break those down for me.
Product, that's the actual good or service, the features, the quality, the branding, the packaging, all of that. Price, well, that's pretty self-explanatory. How much will customers pay? Place, that's about distribution, how you get the product to the customer. And promotion, that's all the ways you communicate with your audience. Advertising, sales, promotions, public relations, all that.
So you need to have a good product at the right price in the right place and promote it effectively.
Exactly. It all has to work together.
Now, all of this activity within a business requires money, right? Let's talk about finance.
Finance is the lifeblood of any business. Managing money, making sure there's enough coming in, and that it's being spent wisely.
Right, making sure the bills are paid, that there's money to invest in growth.
Businesses need various sources of finance. To get started, to fund their operations, this might be personal savings, bank loans, government grants.
So there are different ways to get that initial capital, that money, to get things moving.
Right. And as the business grows, they might look at investment from shareholders or reinvest their profits.
Using the money they've earned to grow even more.
Exactly. And managing cash flow is crucial. That's the money coming in and out of the business. You got to make sure there's enough coming in to cover expenses.
Right, so you don't run out of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cash flow forecasting, that's a vital tool, predicting future inflows and outflows.
So planning ahead, anticipating potential issues.
Exactly. And there are some key financial terms to understand. Revenue, that's the money from sales. Costs, that's the expenses. Profit, well, that's what's left over after you subtract costs from revenue. You have gross profit, which is revenue minus the direct cost of making the product or service. Net profit, that's the profit after all expenses, including interest, taxes. And then there's the break-even point. That's the level of sales where revenue equals total costs.
Okay, so the point where you're not making a profit, but you're not losing money either.
Exactly. And businesses use financial statements to analyze their performance. Things like the income statement, which shows profit or loss over a period of time, and the statement of financial position, a snapshot of assets, liabilities, equity at a specific point in time.
So they're constantly monitoring their financial health. Now, for the learner who might be encountering these concepts in school, let's talk about how this knowledge is evaluated.
Sure. In business exams, you often see different types of questions. Multiple choice, testing recall of facts, short answer, where you have to explain concepts, calculations, where you use formulas, work with numbers, and then case studies.
Case studies, those are like real-world scenarios. Yeah.
Exactly. They present a business situation, and you have to apply your knowledge, analyze the situation, maybe propose solutions. You might also have to write essays discussing concepts in more depth. The key is, it's not just about memorizing definitions. It's about applying your knowledge, showing you understand how these things work in the real world.
Demonstrating practical understanding. And what are examiners really looking for? What makes a good answer?
They're usually looking for three things. We call them assessment objectives, or AOs. AO1 is knowledge and understanding. Basically, can you recall the facts, the concepts? AO2 is application. Can you use that knowledge in context, analyze those case studies? And AO3 is analysis and evaluation. Can you break down issues, consider different viewpoints, make judgments?
So you need to know the stuff, be able to use it, and think critically.
Exactly. You need all three for success. Now, we figured you, the learner, might have some questions about all of this. So let's tackle a few of those FAQs. First up, what's the difference between the economic climate and just the economy itself?
Yeah, that's a good one. They sound similar.
They do. Think of the economy as the whole system. You know, how a country produces, distributes, consumes goods and services. The big picture. The economic climate, that's more like the current weather conditions within that system. Is the economy booming, or is it in a slump? The economic climate reflects those prevailing trends.
Okay, so the economy is the system. The climate is the current state of that system.
Exactly. Another question we get is about globalization and prices. We talked about how it can lower prices, but can anything counteract that?
Right, because it's not always a simple equation, is it?
No, it's not. Tariffs, for example, those are taxes on imported goods. Those can push prices back up. And then there are fluctuations in exchange rates. Those can also affect prices.
So it's a complex interplay of forces. We also talked about legislation and how important it is for businesses to follow the rules. But why? What's the big deal?
Well,